In today's video, I am going to explain anatomy of fascia around thigh. I want to focus on this fascia. This is iliotibial band. Iliotibial band, also known as IT band. Actually, this is the thickest part of thigh fascia. It is thickest part of fascia lata. Fascia lata means basically fascia of thigh. Okay, iliotibial band is the thickest part of fascia lata, thigh fascia. Okay, this is very thick. You can find that. You can palpate this fascia on lateral part of thigh. You feel like dense part of the fascia beneath skin. That's fascia lata. This part is very important for pelvis, hip, and knee. I will explain why. If you focus on around pelvis, imagine this is ilium. Two muscles attached to iliotibial band. It's on anterior part and it's on posterior part. On anterior part, there is tensor fascia lata. Tensor fascia lata. It is a muscle on anterior part of pelvis and hip. Tensor fascia lata. What is fascia lata? Fascia lata is thigh fascia, right? So tensor fascia lata actually tightens up fascia lata, thigh fascia. Then this muscle attaches to iliotibial band. Thus, tensor fascia lata is so important to maintain tension of iliotibial band and fascia lata. Very important. And on the posterior part, gluteus maximus attaches to iliotibial band. Gluteus maximus, tensor fascia lata, and gluteus maximus attaches to iliotibial band. Let's look at orientation of these two muscles. Tensor fascia lata is about here. Gluteus maximus is about here. Thus, via iliotibial band, you can go to either posterior way or anterior way. So if one of these muscles or both of them get tight, that can create tightness around here. Then if gluteus maximus gets tight, this tightness can go to tensor fascia lata via iliotibial band. Does it make sense? Because these two muscles attach to iliotibial band. That makes sense. On the other hand, if tensor fascia lata gets tight, this tightness can go to gluteus maximus via iliotibial band. Very important. So, if somebody's iliotibial band is very tight, their pelvic movement and hip movement tend to be very tight. It tend to be very immovable. That is why I see iliotibial band is very important fascia for both pelvic movement and hip movement. Now let me focus anatomy around knee. Okay, this is close view. This is iliotibial band. Actually, iliotibial band attaches to lateral part of tibia. This part is called Gardy's tubercle. Gardy's tubercle. It's on lateral part of tibia. Okay, lateral tibia. Iliotibial band. Then let me talk about tensor fascia lata again. Alright, what is function of tensor fascia lata? Main function is hip flexion. Hip flexion is important for walking, running, jogging, and so on. Basically, hip flexion is you bring thigh forward, upward, basically this way. That is why tensor fascia lata is important for walking and running. Let's say somebody runs like 10 kilometers every day, 7 days a week. What's gonna happen for tensor fascia lata? There is high chance that tensor fascia lata gets tight because of a too much hip flexion movement, right? Too much hip flexion movement. Tensor fascia lata gets tight. Now, where this tightness can go? This can go to down to Gardy's tubercle. Do you see this blue connection? Too much use of tensor fascia lata. This can tighten up iliotibial band. Then what's going to happen for lateral knee? Now there can be a mechanical stress around lateral part of knee. Then eventually there can be inflammation, there can be pain, there can be tightness around here. This thing is very common among long endurance athletes, such as long distance runner, any kind of long endurance athletes, runners, swimmers, long endurance bike riders, very common. Let me explain that again. Too much use of tensor fascia lata, okay? Tensor fascia lata function, hip flexion, that's basically leg forward movement. Too much use of tensor fascia lata can tighten up iliotibial band. Iliotibial band attaches to lateral knee. What's there? There's Gardy's tubercle. Too much use of tensor fascia lata and tension of iliotibial band can tighten up Gardy's tubercle upward. Thus, there can be inflammation, there can be pain, there can be tightness around Gardy's tubercle. This is very common among long endurance athletes. Alright, iliotibial band, very important for pelvic movement, hip movement, and knee dysfunction. Around pelvis and hip, there are tensor fascia lata and gluteus maximus. Two important hip muscles related to iliotibial band. Now, this connection can go to lateral knee. There's Gardy's tubercle. If this part gets tight, this can trigger for lateral knee pain, lateral knee inflammation, lateral knee dysfunction. Iliotibial band, very, very important fascia. If you liked today's video, please hit the like button, comment and subscribe. See you next video.